October of 54 BC brought a brutal, bone-chilling cold to the thick forests of northern Gaul. Inside a hastily constructed timber camp, 4,000 Roman legionaries under the command of Quintus Cicero were trapped on a tiny patch of land. Just 3 meters outside their thin wooden palisade, 60,000 enraged warriors of the Nervii tribe swarmed in the pitch-black darkness. The air was thick with smoke, burning resin, and the stench of thousands of enemy barbarians. The soldiers of the 14th Legion had not slept for 5 straight days, standing on the absolute edge of physical and mental collapse. Half the garrison was wounded, literally carving enemy arrows out of their shields to shoot them back. Yet somehow, against all biological odds, these men survived. This brutal siege highlights one of the most remarkable operational secrets of ancient warfare: how the soldiers of Rome managed to sleep within arm's reach of an armed enemy and wake up alive. While most ancient cultures viewed sleep as an inevitable, dangerous weakness, the Romans transformed sleep into a weapon of war. They recognized that human fatigue was a logistical constraint to be engineered, managed, and controlled, just like grain supplies, drinking water, or weapon stocks. The first line of defense was architectural paranoia. Even after an exhausting 30-kilometer march carrying 50 pounds of armor, weapons, and tools, a Roman army never laid down on bare ground. Before anyone could rest, every soldier took out his shovel and began to build a temporary city. Guided by specialized military surveyors called mensurs, who measured precise right angles using an instrument called the groma, the legionaries transformed into highly efficient construction workers. They dug a deep moat around the perimeter and piled the excavated earth into a dense rampart. On top of this embankment, they drove sharpened wooden stakes, the pilum muralis, which each soldier carried on his back during the march. This temporary fort, known as a castrum, followed a standardized layout used everywhere from the frozen forests of Germania to the scorching deserts of Syria. The layout was so consistent that any legionary could find his assigned tent in pitch black, with his eyes closed. Crucially, the layout incorporated a 60-foot buffer zone between the outer wall and the first row of tents. This empty perimeter, called the intervallum, was a brilliant tactical innovation. It prevented enemy arrows or thrown spears from reaching sleeping troops, while giving the garrison ample space to assemble without causing a crush during a sudden night alarm. This spatial organization provided an incredible biological advantage. Germanic and Celtic warriors slept directly on tree roots in the open forest, their nervous systems constantly flooded with adrenaline and cortisol as they jumped at every snapped twig. Behind the Roman rampart, inside the secure interior of the camp, a legionary's brain could fully disengage. They entered deep restorative sleep, allowing their bodies to flush out lactic acid and repair muscle microtraumas. The next morning, 2 armies would meet, one side chronically exhausted from a paranoid night in the woods, and the other side physically refreshed and combat-ready. The basic unit of Roman army life was the contribenium, 8 men who shared a leather tent, a single pack mule, a hand-cranked grain mill, and a cooking cauldron. These 8 men lived, marched, fought, and slept as a single organism. The interior of their calfskin tent smelled overpoweringly of sweat, wet wool, and rancid lard, but to a legionary, that stench represented total safety. When crisis struck, this systematic training prevented total panic. During the siege of Cicero's camp, the Nervii hurled red-hot clay projectiles into the fort, setting the dry leather tents ablaze. Acrid black smoke filled the air, destroying personal possessions and food supplies. In almost any other army, soldiers would have broken ranks to extinguish their burning gear. Instead, the legionaries remained shoulder to shoulder on the earthen ramparts, absorbing the unbearable heat on their backs while thrusting their spears into the advancing enemy. They understood a cold, rational truth. A lost tent was a temporary inconvenience, but a breach in the outer wall meant instant death for everyone. Overnight, working in pitch darkness, they constructed 120 wooden watchtowers from pre-cut timber, relying entirely on memory and standardized engineering protocols. When the enemy surrounded the camp with a 15-mile trench, shrinking the distance between the two forces to a mere 3 meters, safety shifted from architecture to strict human discipline. The Romans divided the night into 4 equal watches, or vigilia, measured continuously by a water clock known as the clepsydra. Only 1/4 of the garrison stood guard at any given time, allowing 75% of the army to sleep deeply even under siege. To keep sentries alert in the freezing dark, cavalry patrols called tesserari moved along the walls all night. Sentries were required to present a small wooden cube called a tessera, which was inscribed each evening with a secret password chosen by the commander. If a sentry fell asleep, the patrolman silently took his weapon or cloak as irrefutable proof of negligence. The penalty for sleeping on duty was absolute horror. In the morning, the guilty soldier faced the fustuarium, an ancient ritual where the condemned man was beaten to death with wooden clubs and stones by his own 7 tentmates. By forcing the soldiers' closest comrades to execute the sentence, the Roman military eliminated individual sympathy and created an unbreakable web of collective responsibility. Every man became an uncompromising overseer of his neighbor's alertness. When discipline broke down, catastrophe was immediate. During the civil chaos of 69 AD at the Battle of Bedriacum, exhausted legions collapsed onto their shields in the mud without digging trenches or posting sentries. Had the enemy launched a night attack, thousands would have been slaughtered where they lay. Decades later, General Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo restored order in Armenia through brutal measures, forcing sentries to stand guard in sub-zero frosts until one soldier was found dead at his post, frozen solid while still holding his spear. Corbulo proved that when men feared their commander more than the cold or the enemy, survival became an automatic reflex. Modern medical science confirms what Roman commanders understood intuitively. After 72 hours of total sleep deprivation, the human mind enters an autopilot state, relying entirely on muscle memory and spinal reflexes. Centurions would strike exhausted men with heavy spear butts, using pain shock to release adrenaline and grant a few precious minutes of clear consciousness. When Julius Caesar finally arrived to break the siege of Cicero's camp, 9 out of 10 surviving legionaries were wounded, burnt, and gaunt, yet they stood in perfect formation. Caesar recognized that it was not individual bravery, but cold, methodical camp discipline that had saved the 14th Legion from total annihilation. 2,000 years later, modern military bases still use the exact same principles of buffer zones, perimeter security, and rotation schedules. Rome conquered the known world, not because its soldiers were fearless superhumans, but because it created a system that allowed ordinary men to sleep 3 meters from death and wake up ready to fight.